warm welcome to all of you. Glad that you can join us here for our worship service at the First Unitarian Church in Salt Lake City. I'm sure everybody is now feeling pretty well after the election has certainly indicated who the new president is supposed to be. We'll see, but it's looking pretty good thus far. I'm actually relieved for many reasons. Perhaps one of the biggest factors for me was that everybody I know seemed to indicate rather strongly that if Trump were reelected, they would move out of the country. And I was wondering if anybody would be left here, because everybody was going either to Canada or to New Zealand or to Australia. It was absolutely bizarre. But I'm glad everybody now is going to remain here. But I was struck how I never heard that threat of exile from the other side. I didn't hear anybody say, well, if Biden wins, I'm just going to need a little strongman autocracy, and so I'm going to move to Poland or Hungary or Brazil. That for some reason that didn't seem to happen. I'm going to think about why that hasn't happened. In the meanwhile, we've got at least another 4 years with all of us together. Thank goodness. I have but one announcement, a very important announcement for our service today, and that has to do with our Thanksgiving contributions to our sister church, San Esteban, in West Valley City. We have had a sister relationship with that congregation for 10 years, and that congregation, as most of us are well aware, is comprised, about 98-99% of undocumented workers, and they really need a lot of support. And so we have been doing this for, as I said, 10 years. In the past, or up until this year, we've always combined Christmas and Thanksgiving, and this year is going to be a Thanksgiving drive only. To give you some idea of where we are in the giving department, we have averaged about $4,000 a year for Thanksgiving, giving the gift certificates to San Esteban. So far this year, we're only at about $1,600. So this is our last push. Please help us meet our history of generosity towards our sister church. Please have the checks to the church made out to First Unitarian Church with a memo to either a sister church or San Esteban. Please have that here by Thursday the 19th, and we will then get that to Pastor Ramos as quickly as possible. You also have opportunities to hit the donate button on our website. You'll be able to support San Esteban. You can do it through Giveify. And please help out. We'd like to help them very much this year, and there will not be another request for Christmas. I'd like to light the chalice right now. And this chalice is lit in Unitarian Universalist churches throughout North America and in New Zealand and in Australia. For some reason, it's not lit in Poland, as far as I know, but, be that as it may, let us do the symbol of our faith. Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
A few years ago, the children of the religious education program played a game right here in Little Chapel. They all sat in one great big circle. I stood in the middle holding this ball of yarn. We tossed this ball of yarn around the circle, each holding this little bits in our hand. At some point, someone tugged too hard and it broke. Quickly, one of the older kids jumped up and said, "I can fix it," and tied the pieces back together. We weaved this web, this divine tapestry that day, and talked about the visual representation we were creating for one of our very big principles, the interconnected web of all existence, which we are all a part of. Today, for our Time for All Ages, I have a book to share with you about this web which we all weave together.
The Invisible Web by Patrice Karst, illustrated by Joanne Lew-Vriethoff. The very best news ever has begun to spread all over the world. One heart at a time, shout it from the mountaintops. Every single one of us is connected to those we love by invisible strings. That means Giovanna and her daddy are always together, even though he moved to a new house. Omar can feel the tugs of love from his parents, even though he is living far away at school. Mr. Chang still feels Mrs. Chang close by, even though she died such a very long time ago. And you, at this very moment, may feel the string of someone close to you, even though they aren't here. You can't see it, but it's real. Our strings reach to everyone we know. They travel far and wide, to families and friends, classmates and coaches, to bus drivers and babysitters, neighbors and pets, to aunts and uncles and grandparents and grandchildren and countless other people. And all of those people have hundreds of strings. Soaring high over the rocky peaks and across all 7 seas, deep into jungles and valleys, and winding through the busiest of cities, all these strings crisscross one another and create a nest that covers the planet, interlacing us together, cradling us forever. The invisible web. The web has no borders and wraps around every continent. Within it lives butterflies and flowers, starfish and seahorses, lions and ants, rivers and snowstorms, and all human beings, Giovanna, Omar, Mr. Chang, and of course, you and me. Some may say it even reaches to our ancestors and those we cherish in the beyond. One tug on a string sends love to every one of us, woven together in this divine tapestry. And that means just one good deed travels across the entire web. Everything is linked. But sometimes, folks forget. When they can't feel their strings, they forget about our invisible web. And that's when strings get tangled up. Like when lonely Louisa isn't invited to sit with anyone at school at lunchtime. Or when sad Stefano wishes his friend Marcos wasn't so bossy when they played. Or when Mrs. Patel struggles at work without help, she just wants to quit. Even violence and war can erupt when many of us forget the web. When strings are ignored, they can become weak and unravel. But the more people who care for the web, the stronger it remains. The web feels like every parent since the beginning of time, holding and protecting each one of us in the millions of gentle arms. What could be stronger than all those hands holding us close? So many supportive fingers can always find a way to untangle strings so that love can flow again. It's up to every one of us to spread its word. Our time is right now. As we tell our family and friends, sisters will remind brothers, who will write to cousins, who will call great-grandparents, who will just smile and nod as if they had always known. If we remember the web, and we tug at it often, nobody will ever be left out. We will see each other more clearly. The people of the world will look into each other's eyes. They will smile at one another. And when one of them cries, they will all want to help. And they do! Marcos apologizes to Stefano, who forgives his friend, and they have even more fun playing. Someone helps Mrs. Patel at work and tells her what a great job she is doing. She remembers that she's important and feels happy. And Louisa feels warm and bubbly inside when a few of the kids in her class ask her to join them under the banya tree for lunch. She knows right then that the invisible web is real. After school, Louisa cries with joy as she strokes her cat, who purrs the news to the stars. And the stars whisper the secret to the clouds, who share it with the songbirds, who serenade the world with the exquisite melody at the start of each morning and all during the day, until, as the invisible web glitters in the magic of twilight, the owls take over and hoot the news throughout the night. The invisible web is alive. Its time is right now. It breathes as we breathe, pulsating all over our earth, the single heartbeat of life and love. And do you know what that makes us all? One very big family.
What a beautiful story that was about the strings that connect our hearts to one another. You know, now that the election is behind us, I have been missing you more than ever. Yet I am so confident of the strength of our community. I know that there are strings connecting our members and friends together that cannot be broken. Despite the challenges that we are facing as a church community, we continue to do the work of love and justice together. We continue to keep each other safe and well. But it's so hard not to see you every week in person here in our chapel. I know you feel the same way. A colleague of mine, the Reverend Molly Hausch Gordon, has written a beautiful poem that I'd like to share with you that captures this feeling. When we are together again, I will weep to touch your hand, and I won't even be embarrassed. I will ask quietly if you would like a hug. I have learned such tender caution. When we are together again, I will be the last to leave the table, except that you will stay too. It might be 2 or 3 meals before we can bear to part. I will sing a descant to your melody, with no thought for the aerosols of song, and every thought for the new texture I can hear now in your voice, for the strength of your precious breath. I invite you now to take a breath, maybe a deep breath. Any kind of breath will do. Just be with your breath exactly the way it is, without trying to change it. When we find ourselves in circumstances about which we can do little, we can always find our breath and see what it has to teach us about accepting what is happening right now in this moment. Then reach out with the threads that connect you to those you love in your church community. Think of their faces, their voices, the way they laugh, the great times you've had, and the important work you've done together. All of those things are still present. They haven't gone anywhere. They are still here with you, and you are with them. And then, maybe, in this moment of breathing and connection, breathe out a prayer of well-being for each one of them, the ones you know and the ones you haven't met yet. On the next breath, breathe out an intention to keep those threads strong and unbroken. One more breath, and breathe out a prayer of courage for each of us, a prayer that we each have the fortitude to go on, staying apart in this pandemic time until we can all safely come together again. We need one another now more than ever. Amen.
There's an old Miss Peach cartoon strip that many ministers, well, at least ministers of my generation, have just loved and somehow committed to memory. It's just a lovely little depiction of two girls, and one girl says to the other, "Hey, Shirley, are you still into this metaphysical stuff?" And Shirley shakes her head no, and she said, "I used to want to be one with the universe, but we've decided to go our separate ways." Well, separating ourselves from the universe at whim is more than a child's impression of how things work in the cosmos. In fact, most, if not all of us, actually lose sight of how deeply entrenched we are. That is, how inextricably linked we are to every conceivable facet that makes up this glorious universe. We cannot go our separate ways. The Unitarian Universalist seventh principle spells it out. We affirm the interconnectedness of the web of all existence, but then it hangs on a most significant tag at the end, which seldom penetrates our consciousness. We say it by rote, like reciting a catechism unthinkingly. The principle ends with, "of which we are a part." We affirm the interconnectedness of the web of all existence of which we are a part. But can't we go our separate ways? I mean, if we really want to? We often live our lives as though we matter more than the universe, and we should take priority in satisfying our needs over and above that which keeps the universe intact. We also believe that somehow our country is separate from the rest of the world, and thereby precipitating this idiotic mantra, "America first." You know, we just finished 4 years of an America first mindset, which resonates with people who insist on putting themselves first as well. It's dualistic thinking that brings us to this place where we believe ourselves as separate from nature, from God, separate from each other. But guess what? It's really all of one piece. We are a part of that one piece. It all hangs together. We're in it. It's inescapable. We can't get away from it regardless how hard we try to deceive ourselves, thinking we exist in isolation from all things else. I mean, when we look at the night sky, for example, it's as though what we're really doing is identifying these separate objects. Oh, yeah, there's the moon, and yeah, I see a constellation over there. And oh, that bright star is probably a planet, and that dust over there, that's the Milky Way. But really, it's all of one piece. The stuff found in stardust is the same stuff that's found inside of us all. We are all of the same piece. And we laugh and cry and grieve and love the same regardless what shade our skin coloring. We all have rituals at birth and death, regardless if we're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Buddhist, or if we live in Beverly Hills or in Harlem. There's no separation. And every child born into this world is of equal human worth. There is no American exceptionalism in this interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. Our children are not more valuable than the children in Somalia or Iran. That makes war an absurd concept, doesn't it? I mean, that makes placing any nation or person as first a kind of madness. I kind of like Annie Dillard's observation. We are in this world only once, so we might as well get the hang of it. Well, frankly, we're not really getting the hang of it very well. We fail to see ourselves as held in the same web that cradles rivers and trees and mosquitoes and koalas and all people, regardless if they live in mud huts or in Trump towers. Surely the cartoon strip may think she is free to go her own way, but she and you and I are part of this web of all existence, and separation from it is a delusion. Buddhists like to use a river as a metaphor for the very flow of life. It moves endlessly in one current, but sometimes, due to rocks or branches or an uneven river bottom, a small whirlpool or eddy forms over to the side a little bit by the riverbed. It's part of the same river, but in human terms, people are fooled into thinking that the whirlpool is their whirlpool alone and completely separate from the river. And people do a lot of crazy stuff and hurtful stuff to preserve their own private little whirlpool as though it is theirs forever and won't be taken by the big river's forceful flow. We're not separate from the river, no matter how hard we try to create that illusion. You know, we're not getting the hang of it. We're not getting the hang of it because we are convinced that the cosmos is comprised of separate entities. And this notion extends even to God, a concept of an object that is somehow separate from the universe. A true story. A Christian minister is having dinner with the great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. And as you can imagine, of course, they're discussing theology. And the minister, rather perplexed by the Buddhist's lack of a deity, feels he has this solid, invincible argument for the existence of God. And so he asks Thich Nhat Hanh if he was grateful for the food that he ate. And the Buddhist said, yes, I am. And the minister then proceeds, well, if you are really grateful, how can you not believe in God? God created everything we enjoy, including the food we eat. So obviously the minister insists that gratitude needs an object to which we give thanks. And that's God. Thank you up there. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh didn't quite know what to say, for he was certain that he was very grateful for all his blessings. And so he explains, Buddhists feel grateful throughout the meal and throughout the day. We express this by being fully aware of the food and living every moment deeply. This is how we try to express gratitude to all of life. Before every meal, the Buddhists will recite, "This food is the gift of the whole universe, the earth, the sky, and much hard work." It's dualistic thinking that separates heaven from earth. We need to understand it's all of one piece. Briefly, a Hindu perspective. A young boy is sent forth to a wise teacher to learn about Brahman, God. And after several years, the lad returns home filled with pride over his knowledge. His father, who is a Hindu priest, is dismayed that the boy still does not understand the concept of Brahman. So he directs his son to dissolve a clump of salt in a pan of water. And then the father asks, "Where's the salt?" The boy had no answer. And the father clarified it for him once and for all. He said, "Being in solution, it is everywhere." The salt dissolved in solution is everywhere. The father continues, "Like the salt hidden in the water, so is Brahman hidden in all the world. Brahman is all. Brahman is you, my son. Brahman is you." Let me add a postscript. In Hinduism, Brahman is the absolute principle of all existence, and the essence of every human being is called Atman. So Brahman and Atman are one. All existence and the essence of humanity are one. And the duty of every person is to discover that she or he is God. So Hindus would consider God another name for the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. We run amok when we fail to see ourselves in the wholeness of all things. So let me make a risky statement here. I think Unitarian Universalists actually have no trouble with the word God. The UU issue about God entails calling a detached object in the heavens worthy of worship and endowing it with all sorts of supernatural powers and wonder. That's where the problem comes in, that this thing up there, so detached, is God. That's what our problem is. And I think Unitarian Universalists, along with so many others, really believe you can't make that separation. It is all of one piece. And I don't think Unitarian Universalists really care what you name it, as long as we understand conceptually it's all of one piece. I mean, even our beloved Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "I am part and parcel of God." Well, this is no self-aggrandizement. It's, when you think about it, actually the precursor to the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. Now, we are not part of this object up in the heavens. We are all of one piece, which Emerson wants to call God. Why not? So how do we keep this lovely image of an inescapable web, everything connected to everything else, one ecosphere for all living organisms, where what affects one affects all, which really means that efforts to separate ourselves from the web only creates injustice and suffering towards others and to all living things? How do we acknowledge this profound way of being in the world where we actually live out the seventh principle? So how do we live our principle in our nation today? How do we live this interconnectedness? Where do we put that? How do we deal and conceive of it in a nation so divided, so separate? We find ourselves, or perhaps intentionally make ourselves, so separate from other people who hold other worldviews. So instead of cultivating whirlpools in the river of life, we call it bubbles. I cultivate my blue bubble, my neighbor perfects his or her red bubble. Blue bubbles, red bubbles. We're all so separate. Makes me realize, we're not really getting the hang of this place. You know what I mean? But don't I have the right, I think we ask, don't I have the right to separate myself from those racists over there? How can they and us be of one piece? Well, in my anti-racism class, which we just finished, it was a wonderful, wonderful 6-week experience, we saw a video of Cornel West making a reference to Brother Trump. He said, people think I'm crazy. People think I've just lost it calling Trump my brother. But he is. I mean, he's not a space alien, but a human being like all of us. Humanity can't be separated into blue and red boxes or liberal and conservative boxes. All of humanity, and this is key, all of humanity finds itself on a continuum. Trump can't be removed from the web of all existence. He's a human being too, on this continuum. He's made some choices, however, that must seriously be brought into question. but we're still of one piece. He's on this continuum like we all are. Trump is my brother, says Cornel West, and that offers us a glimpse into Jesus' teaching about loving our enemy. We know that to be a difficult exercise. We'd rather go our separate ways than love our enemy. But Jesus implies that we cannot separate because there's this unity in all creation. We are all one. He says that over and over and over again in his ministry. We are all one. In digging a bit deeper, we'd have to agree that not one of us is absolutely pure. We are an amalgam of greed and anger and benevolence and generosity. We are not exempt from racism, misogyny, accumulating riches for ourselves. This is all part of the human condition. Human foibles and weaknesses are inside each and every one of us. And to be sure, there is much we are quick to deny in ourselves or deny about ourselves and attribute to others. But when you come right down to it, we are, in fact, a composite of all things, good, bad, ugly, situated on this continuum, still of one piece. If there's a bit of stardust within us, you can sure bet that there's also a bit of our neighbors inside of us, even if they tune into Fox and Friends. It's all of one piece. Hard to believe, isn't it? It's quite a challenge recognizing MAGA people as our brothers and sisters. We're all of one piece. Our UU principle in a nutshell, isn't it? Now, it's definitely challenging to live by our principle. We affirm the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. And the so-called they, them over there, they're a part of it too. It's all of one piece. It's about time we get the hang of it, don't you think? So be it. As we extinguish the chalice, may we learn to discern the sign of the times and to ally ourselves with what is noble rather than base, what is compassionate rather than selfish, and what is eternal rather than fleeting. Amen.